cop tries to humiliate black woman, not knowing she's a high-ranking undercover FBI agent. In the silent hush of a courthouse corridor, tension pulsed beneath every measured step. Spectators, clerks, and even seasoned attorneys felt the suffocating weight of a brewing storm. Rumors crackled like electricity, each voice whispering about a routine hearing that no one expected to become today's headline. A dignified black woman walked through the doors, her stoic composure betraying none of the nerves flickering inside. Nearby, an officer in a crisp uniform lingered with a smirk of entitlement twisting his lips. Little did anyone suspect how far the wheels of justice would turn, and the shocking truth soon to be revealed. The courtroom in question was the Fulton County Superior Court, a stately building with tall white columns set against the busy Atlanta skyline. The morning sun, filtered through the narrow windows in the corridor, cast elongated shadows that danced along the polished floors. Attorney badges glinted under fluorescent lights as people hustled to and fro, each one a piece of the grand puzzle that the American judicial system can be on any given day. This was the kind of day no one thought would stand out, especially for a simple traffic violation hearing. Yet behind those closed doors, something extraordinary was brewing. People love to say that routine days can turn into pivotal moments when we least expect it. That sentiment felt particularly apt as the tension soared, especially for the handful of onlookers who were lucky, or unlucky, enough to witness what was about to unfold. Near the entrance, a woman named Anita Patterson stood calmly. She was in her early 40s, with a graceful bearing and confident poise. As a black woman well-versed in navigating complex institutions, Anita understood that composure could be her strongest shield against bias and intimidation. Her dark hair was pulled back in a sleek bun, accentuating the sharpness of her cheekbones and the warmth of her brown eyes. Today she had chosen a simple knee-length navy blue dress, its tailored lines flattering her athletic form. What no one in that corridor realized was that Anita was far from a regular citizen. She'd come not only to resolve a seemingly minor legal matter, but also on a covert mission that aligned with her top-secret professional role. By day, she was known as a dedicated analyst at a local government office. In reality, she was a high-level investigator working under the umbrella of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, embedded on a crucial operation that demanded absolute secrecy. The details were known to only a select few. The hush about her identity was strict policy. It ensured her safety and the success of her investigations. On that brisk morning, her heart pounded, not from fear of the hearing, but from the knowledge that any slip could blow her cover. Still, Anita breathed steadily. She had weathered far more dangerous storms in her years of service. Compared to chasing down leads on large-scale criminal enterprises, testifying over a traffic ticket seemed almost mundane. Yet the intangible sense of tension that hovered in the hallway made her skin prickle. Toward the back of the corridor, a uniformed police officer leaned against the wall, his arms crossed in a posture of casual authority. He was tall, with neatly cropped hair the color of dried hay, and a rigid jawline that tensed whenever he spotted Anita in his peripheral vision. Sergeant Bradley Kessler, known around the precinct as Brad to his buddies, had cultivated a reputation for being tough on criminals, always pushing the limits of his power with unyielding determination. But rumor had it that he also pushed certain boundaries in less honorable ways. As Anita took a seat on the wooden bench outside the courtroom, she felt his gaze lock onto her. There was an odd, biting intensity in his eyes. She pretended not to notice, flipping open a slim folder of documents that contained everything she needed for the hearing. The hush in the corridor seemed to grow thicker, even as lawyers stepped in and out of the judge's chambers, clutching their manila folders with urgent efficiency. A court clerk wearing a crisp black blazer emerged and called the next case. It wasn't Anita's turn yet. She still had a few minutes to gather her thoughts. She also used the moment to surreptitiously observe Sergeant Kessler. He strode confidently through the hallway, nodding curtly to some colleagues, ignoring others. She saw him approach the podium where a clerk was double-checking the docket. Anita's phone buzzed in her purse. Drawing it out in a swift, discreet motion, she glanced at the screen. A single text from her FBI handler flashed, We've got eyes on everything. Stay calm. She quickly locked the phone and slipped it back into her bag. The message was meant to reassure her that her team was standing by if she needed backup, though she hoped it wouldn't come to that. When another name was called, someone apparently scheduled before Anita, Sergeant Kessler took the opportunity to step up behind her. She felt his presence before she turned. He cleared his throat loudly, his voice a gravelly intrusion in the quiet space. "Well, well, you're up soon, aren't you?" He sneered, leaning in just close enough to make his words private but uncomfortable. "Traffic violation, was it? Or do you have something else cooking?" Anita turned slightly, meeting his gaze with a neutral expression. "Just a routine matter," she said, her voice steady. "Nothing anyone needs to worry about." Kessler took in her calm stance and didn't seem to like it. "Strange to see a woman like you coming in here all by yourself," he continued. "Don't you have a lawyer, or are you handling this pro se?" Anita raised an eyebrow. She felt a flicker of irritation at the underlying condescension in his tone. "I prefer to handle my own affairs," she responded smoothly. Kessler's mouth curled into something resembling a smirk. He glanced around as if searching for an audience, before replying. "Well, I hope you don't plan on trying to sweet-talk the judge. It won't get you far in this courthouse." Anita recognized the subtle aggression in his voice. She had dealt with men like him before, men who wore authority like an armor, weaponizing it to demean and belittle. Instead of rising to the bait, she remained poised. "I don't have any plans to sweet-talk anyone, officer." "Sergeant," he corrected immediately, his ego clearly pricked. "Sergeant Kessler." "Of course," Anita replied politely. "Sergeant." Before the exchange could escalate, the clerk reappeared and called out Anita's name. She gathered her folder, rose from the bench and shot Kessler one last composed glance before walking toward the wooden doors leading to the courtroom. She could feel his gaze burning into her back. Something about him put her on edge in a way that was more than just casual hostility. He seemed almost eager for confrontation, the kind of person who relished any chance to assert his dominance. The door closed behind Anita, enclosing her in the formal solemnity of the courtroom. Polished wooden pews flanked the aisle, and the judge's bench stood elevated at the front, an American flag displayed proudly behind. Anita took a seat in the front row, near where the prosecutor sat. From this vantage point, she could see the small panel of chairs designated for defendants and witnesses off to one side. She glanced briefly at the back of the room, where a tall window allowed sunlight to stream through. The scene looked deceptively peaceful, yet she sensed the storm swirling just beneath the surface. Her mission might be overshadowed by this sudden tension with Kessler, but she reminded herself to stay focused. The hearing was a simple matter. She had evidence to show that the ticket was erroneous, and that should have been the end of it. But life, she had learned, rarely follows the script. If she were to make a guess, the drama was only just beginning, especially given that antagonistic glare she had just endured in the hallway. The fact that an FBI team was watching suggested there might be more layers to this day than she anticipated. Within a few minutes, the judge, a serious-looking man in his 60s with wire-rimmed glasses perched on a stern face, motioned for Anita to approach. The clerk announced her case, a traffic violation for allegedly running a red light 3 weeks prior. Anita stepped forward, her folder clasped in both hands. She could practically feel Kessler's scorn radiating from somewhere behind her. The prosecutor, a young man fresh out of law school by the look of him, recited the basic facts. The ticket alleged that Anita's car had blown through the intersection of Peachtree Street and Pine around 8 p.m. on a Friday. According to the police report, an on-duty officer claimed to have witnessed the infraction. The fine was steep, and the officer recommended mandatory driving school. Anita listened patiently, waiting for her turn to speak. She hadn't made eye contact with Kessler yet, but she knew from prior research that he was the one who wrote the citation. She opened her folder and extracted a series of documents, including traffic camera footage she had obtained through her professional connections. She was ready to present her side of the story, which demonstrated she was at a full stop when the light was turning yellow, and only proceeded through the intersection on green. The judge nodded, adjusting his glasses. "Miss Patterson, let's hear your defense." She carefully explained the sequence of events, noting discrepancies in the report and referencing the time-stamped video stills. She even pointed out that the camera's data indicated her brake lights were engaged, proving she stopped. The judge leaned forward, studying the evidence. The prosecutor, clearly not expecting such thorough documentation, glanced uncertainly at the file in front of him. Midway through her explanation, the door at the back of the courtroom opened with a faint creak. Anita paused momentarily, glancing back. Sergeant Kessler stepped in, standing with his arms folded as though he owned the place. She turned her attention back to the judge, continuing her defense with unwavering composure. But she couldn't ignore the tension that returned the moment Kessler set foot in the room. After reviewing the documents, the judge asked, "Do you have any witness statements or additional evidence, Miss Patterson?" Anita took a breath, deciding she would keep her testimony straightforward. "No additional witnesses, Your Honor. The traffic camera footage should be sufficient, as well as the inconsistencies in the officer's timeline." The judge nodded, tapping his gavel lightly as if to punctuate his thoughts. "Very well. I will look over the camera footage carefully. If your argument holds, this citation will be dismissed and any associated fees refunded." Sergeant Kessler cleared his throat from the back of the room. "Your Honor, if I may." The judge turned, raising an eyebrow. "Sergeant Kessler, you are here in your capacity as the citing officer. Do you have something relevant to add?" Kessler stepped forward with an air of confidence that bordered on arrogance. "Yes, Your Honor. I'd like to note that the intersection in question has a history of malfunctioning signals. It's possible the camera's timing mechanism could be off." Anita felt a surge of annoyance. She had thoroughly researched this and found no records of signal malfunctions during that period. However, she kept her expression neutral. The judge rubbed his temples. "We'll take that into consideration if there's documented evidence. But as it stands, Miss Patterson's evidence appears substantial. Unless you have more specific documentation, I will be inclined to grant Miss Patterson's motion to dismiss." Kessler hesitated, his face flushing slightly. He had nothing concrete to offer. "I just think we should be cautious, Your Honor. People can manipulate footage." Anita met his eyes, her gaze steady. "It comes directly from the city's traffic monitoring system, Sergeant. You're implying the city's system was tampered with? That's quite an accusation." The judge interjected. "Very well. I will recess briefly to review Miss Patterson's video evidence. Court will resume in 10 minutes. With a sharp rap of the gavel, the judge rose. Anita let out a small sigh of relief and stepped away from the defendant's table. Though her heart beat a bit faster, she maintained a calm demeanor as she returned to her seat, ignoring the eyes that seemed glued to her. She could feel Sergeant Kessler's frustration intensify, as though her ability to defend herself, and do so articulately, challenged his sense of control. Even as the court went into a brief recess, Anita knew this was only the beginning. She had come here expecting a short legal proceeding. Instead, fate had thrown her into a confrontation with a man whose pride was evidently on the line. Beyond her personal annoyance, she sensed something deeper, a tension that might reveal cracks in the system she was sworn to protect and investigate. If Kessler was willing to lie or distort evidence over a simple traffic ticket, what else might he be involved in? Her phone vibrated in her purse again, but she didn't pick it up this time. Instead, she steeled her resolve. She had a mission, and nothing, not even an overzealous officer, was going to stand in her way. When the 10-minute recess was called, Anita quietly left the courtroom, making her way toward a small alcove near the vending machines. She needed a moment to breathe, to clear her thoughts, and to plan her next steps. Though the traffic ticket itself seemed poised for dismissal, she sensed the waves of tension rolling off Sergeant Kessler. In her experience, men like him rarely walked away in defeat without a fight. As she stood by the vending machines, the neon lights flickering overhead, she considered the implications. Her FBI assignment had led her to examine several local police officers suspected of corruption. While she hadn't initially honed in on Kessler, Perhaps fate had just placed a spotlight on him. If he was brazen enough to fabricate details on a petty traffic ticket, he could certainly be involved in larger misconduct. But the question remained, how deep did his corrupt behavior run, and what was at stake? A hushed conversation from around the corner caught her attention. Anita gently leaned to peer through the gap. There, standing in a dimly lit hallway, was Kessler himself, talking to a second officer with short-cropped hair and a slightly uncertain posture. Their conversation was subdued, punctuated by pointed glances in Anita's general direction. "She's lying," Kessler insisted in a hoarse whisper. "I know what I saw. She blew that light." The other officer shifted uncomfortably. "Brad, the footage seems pretty clear. Maybe you just made a mistake. It happens." Kessler's eyes narrowed, and Anita caught a glimpse of fury in them. "I don't make mistakes like that. And who the hell does she think she is, coming in here talking like some fancy lawyer? I swear there's something off about her. She's too polished, too prepared." A flicker of apprehension danced through Anita's mind. Kessler wasn't just suspicious of the ticket situation. He seemed suspicious of her entire persona. Perhaps her well-researched defense had tipped him off. Most civilians wouldn't be so thorough, but Anita's background in gathering evidence was second nature. "She's probably just one of those people who hates paying fines," the other officer offered, still trying to calm Kessler down. "Let the judge decide. You don't want to get on Judge Carmichael's bad side." Kessler grunted. "I can handle Carmichael. He's not the problem. She is." Then he added in a low voice, "I'll find a way to make her slip up. People like her always do." The second officer frowned, apparently uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. But before anything else could be said, Kessler noticed a flicker of movement. Anita quickly withdrew, pressing herself against the vending machine, her pulse quickening. Footsteps echoed across the polished floor, and she heard the retreating sound of Kessler's boots. Once she was certain they were gone, Anita inhaled sharply, her mind racing. She had never intended to draw extra attention to herself during this mission, but it seemed unstoppable now. Kessler's anger wasn't simply about a traffic violation. It had the flavor of a personal vendetta. That made him dangerous, and not just to her, but potentially to others under his watch. She pulled out her phone, saw the earlier text from her FBI handler, and typed a quick message. "Possible lead, Kessler, aggressive. We'll keep eyes on him." She hit send, then locked her phone. If Kessler was involved in bigger corruption, she needed to gather proof. But she also had to be cautious. Any misstep could expose her role as a federal investigator and blow the case wide open prematurely. When she re-entered the courtroom, the judge was already seated, carefully examining the video stills. The prosecutor flipped through pages of an evidence packet, his brow furrowed. Kessler stood behind the prosecutor's table, arms folded, jaw set in defiance. "Miss Patterson," the judge began, "after reviewing the footage and the data associated with the traffic light cycles, I find no evidence to support the ticket. There is no sign that you ran the red light. In fact, the footage indicates you were stopped for several seconds." He paused, glancing at Kessler. "Sergeant, unless you have further evidence, I am prepared to dismiss this citation immediately." Kessler cleared his throat. "Your Honor, I maintain that I witnessed a violation." "That is noted," the judge interrupted firmly. "However, evidence must be corroborated by reliable documentation. Miss Patterson has provided credible video proof. The court cannot simply ignore that. Citation dismissed." The gavel struck the sound block decisively. A wave of relief momentarily washed over Anita, but it was quickly replaced by the awareness that Kessler would not let this go. She gathered her documents, thanked the judge, and prepared to leave. Kessler glared at her from across the aisle. "Must be nice to have friends in high places," he muttered under his breath as she passed. Though the words were quiet, Anita caught every syllable, recognizing the malice laced within them. In the corridor, the tension felt even thicker than before, as though the very air was charged with confrontation. Anita was about to push through the double doors leading to the outside when Kessler called her name sharply. "Miss Patterson, a moment of your time," he said, stepping forward, his badge catching the fluorescent light. He wore a tight grin, more menacing than friendly. She paused, turning to face him, mindful of her posture. "Yes, Sergeant." He gestured for her to move aside, away from the passing crowd. "You might have convinced the judge you were innocent, but I know better. People like you think you can just, what, get away with anything because you're articulate? Or maybe you flash some big connections to the city council." His tone dripped with sarcasm, and Anita felt her chest tighten. She responded calmly, "Sergeant, the evidence spoke for itself. There were no connections flashed, and certainly no illusions about a getting away with anything." He took a step closer, invading her personal space. "I'll be keeping an eye on you. Don't think for a second that this is over." Anita looked him straight in the eye. "I've done nothing wrong, and I have nothing to hide, so keep all the eyes you want." For a moment, his facade cracked, revealing pure anger. Then he moved away, and Anita walked through the doors into the bright Atlanta sunlight. As she stepped onto the courthouse steps, she inhaled deeply, letting the fresh air steady her. She wasn't afraid of Kessler's intimidation tactics. She'd faced more dangerous adversaries in her line of work. Still, she couldn't shake the sense that this was only the first in a series of battles to come. Gazing at the bustling city street, Anita's mind flicked back to her primary assignment. She wasn't just investigating one bad cop. There was a network of corrupt officials rumored to be involved in everything from falsifying evidence to skimming from drug busts. Her real reason for being in Atlanta was to infiltrate and expose that ring. Now Kessler seemed a prime candidate for scrutiny. A crisp beep from her phone interrupted her thoughts. She checked the screen to see a new message from her handler. "Meet at usual spot. Need an update. Urgent." Anita sighed. She was supposed to keep a low profile, to blend seamlessly until the moment was right for a major takedown. But this morning's encounter had thrust her into the spotlight. Kessler's threat echoed in her mind, his promise to keep her under scrutiny. If he dug too deep, he might uncover her real identity. She needed to stay one step ahead. After taking a cab across town, she arrived at a modest cafe near Piedmont Park. The place was favored by locals for its fresh pastries and quiet ambiance, a perfect meeting spot for discreet conversations. Anita slipped inside, scanning the room. She spotted her handler, Agent Leonard Kim, seated in a corner booth, a half-empty cup of coffee in front of him. Leonard looked up when she approached, concern etched on his features. He was a tall man with a slender build, dressed inconspicuously in a charcoal gray suit. "You okay?" he asked softly, as she slid into the booth. Anita nodded, rubbing the tension from her neck. "Fine, but there's been a development. We may have a new suspect on our radar, Sergeant Bradley Kessler." Leonard leaned forward. "Kessler? Wait, I've heard that name before." He scrolled through his phone, presumably checking notes. "Yes, here we are. Kessler's name came up in an anonymous tip about a narcotics ring within the department. But we never had enough to tie him to anything beyond rumors. Well, after today, I think he's worth watching. He wrote me a bogus traffic ticket, then tried to browbeat me in court. I managed to get it dismissed, but he's itching for a fight." Leonard sighed. "This complicates things. If he's suspicious of you, it could jeopardize the entire operation." Anita nodded. "I know, but if we play it right, he could also lead us to the bigger fish." Leonard drummed his fingers on the table. "What's your plan?" She took a moment to gather her thoughts. "Keep my cover, obviously. I'm just an everyday government employee who was unfairly ticketed, right? Meanwhile, I can do some digging into Kessler's activities. Off the record, if I can find anything that ties him to the ring, that's our starting point." Leonard frowned, concern evident. "Be careful. The department is known for protecting its own, and Kessler's known to have friends in high places." Anita mustered a small smile. "I can handle myself. I'll keep you updated." They wrapped up their discussion, and Anita left the cafe, heading toward her apartment a few blocks away. The mid-afternoon sun was warm on her skin, but a chill lingered in the air, perhaps a metaphor for the precarious situation she found herself in. She needed to remain invisible while stepping directly into the line of fire. Later that evening, after changing into comfortable clothes, Anita sat at her desk in her modest apartment. The room was tidy yet functional. A small table lamp cast a soft glow over her laptop and a clutter of papers, evidence, notes, leads related to her covert investigation. A separate phone line, used solely for secure communications, lay next to her computer. She typed Kessler's name into her encrypted database, cross-referencing known associates, reported misconduct, and any unsolved cases under his watch. A pattern began to emerge. Abrupt transfers between precincts, repeated complaints from citizens, but none ever formally sustained. It was the kind of record that suggested either a streak of unsubstantiated accusations or a well-connected individual who managed to dodge consequences. Anita rubbed her chin. If Kessler was part of a corruption ring, he'd likely have a network of allies. She'd need more than rumors to blow the lid off his operation. Hard evidence, financial records, suspicious contacts, or direct connections to known criminals would be crucial. The question was how to get close enough to gather that evidence without tipping him off. As she sifted through records late into the night, the memory of his sneering face in the courtroom replayed in her mind. His arrogance was an Achilles' heel. Men like Kessler often overplayed their hand, believing themselves untouchable. Perhaps she could use that to her advantage. She closed her laptop around midnight, exhaustion creeping through her bones. The city lights of Atlanta glowed through her window, and a siren wailed in the distance. In this line of work, the nights were never silent, never fully safe. But as far as Anita was concerned, that was her comfort zone, a realm of watchful vigilance, where the distinction between justice and injustice could shift in an instant. The next morning, she rose early. Despite her desire to dive deeper into the investigation, she had to maintain her public-facing role as a local government analyst. She dressed in a crisp blouse and pencil skirt, took the MARTA train downtown, and arrived at a nondescript gray office building that housed a small branch of the city's administrative workforce. Her colleagues knew her as competent but private, a woman who kept to herself and rarely indulged in office gossip. By lunchtime, she had handled a stack of routine paperwork, updated a few municipal reports, and discreetly checked for any updates from her FBI contact. Then her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "You got lucky yesterday. Next time you won't." No signature, but she knew exactly who had sent it. Her heart pounded. Kessler must have traced her phone number somehow, or used departmental resources to contact her. The intimidation was blatant, and that only made Anita more certain she was on the right track. She typed back a brief response. "I don't know who this is, but please stop." Barely a minute later, another text arrived. "You know who this is. Stop the games." Anita's jaw tightened. She turned off her phone. If Kessler thought fear would break her resolve, he was mistaken. But she had to be strategic. Provoking him could lead to unpredictable consequences, especially if he was part of a larger scheme. The best approach was to remain collected, keep her public life normal, and continue digging behind the scenes. When her lunch break came, Anita slipped away from her desk and headed for a tiny park near the building. She found a secluded bench beneath an old oak tree, the lush canopy providing a measure of privacy. She turned on her secure phone, placing a quick call to Leonard Kim. "Hey," he answered quietly as though he expected her call. "Kessler sent me threatening texts," she said without preamble. Leonard blew out a long breath. "He's moving fast. He must really feel threatened by you. Be extremely cautious. If he's this brazen, he might try something else." Anita glanced around, making sure no one was within earshot. "I know, but I can't run and hide. That'll make me look guilty. I'll keep doing my job, blend in, and see if I can pick up any leads from around the precinct. Maybe I can schedule a visit under the guise of a municipal audit or something." Leonard hesitated. "That's risky." "It is," Anita agreed. "But if Kessler is sloppy enough to send direct threats, he might be sloppy enough to leave a trail." "All right, but keep me posted every step of the way. If things get too hot, we'll pull you out." "I understand," she said, then ended the call. Despite her outward composure, a knot of anxiety twisted in her stomach. She was used to high-stakes operations, but those usually came with a clear chain of command, a well-defined cover story, and a safety net of fellow agents. Here, she felt more isolated, relying on her own ingenuity to outmaneuver Kessler. The stakes were personal this time, especially since her cover was more fragile than she'd hoped. For the rest of the day, she worked methodically, her mind constantly toggling between spreadsheets for the city and the puzzle of corruption that Kessler represented. Occasionally, she'd catch her reflection in the computer screen, calm, collected, yet battling an undercurrent of trepidation. As evening approached, she decided to make her first move toward infiltration. She composed an official-sounding email to the Atlanta Police Department, requesting a brief meeting to review any improvements or changes in the traffic division, citing recent public inquiries about traffic enforcement policies. It was just official enough to sound legitimate within her role as a city analyst, and broad enough not to arouse immediate suspicion. The next day, her request was approved, and she was invited to visit the precinct at the end of the week. She'd be meeting with an administrative lieutenant who oversaw logistics and policy. Kessler might not even know about it until she arrived, which was precisely what she wanted. If she could wander the corridors unnoticed, she might glean some hints about the department's inner workings, and possibly about Kessler himself. As the week progressed, Kessler's threats ceased, but Anita felt no relief. Silence often signaled preparation for a bigger move. She kept her routines normal, visited the grocery store, worked out at her local gym, and spent evenings poring over any new tidbits of intel. Each piece of evidence about Kessler painted a more complex portrait. His father had been a police chief in a neighboring county, giving him connections within law enforcement. He'd been reprimanded multiple times for excessive force complaints, but always seemed to emerge unscathed, continuing his climb in the department. Thursday night, she received a call from Leonard. "We've heard chatter about a big drug bust that might happen in the next few weeks. Some crooked officers plan to skim off the confiscated money and narcotics." Kessler's name came up in conversation. Anita's pulse quickened. "That's huge. If we can catch them in the act, it would blow this case wide open." Leonard agreed. "Exactly. But we need tangible proof, a tip-off or inside information. Can you get close enough to find out any details? I'm going to the precinct tomorrow under the traffic enforcement pretense. I'll see what I can dig up." Early the next morning, Anita dressed in a sharp black pantsuit, pinned her hair neatly, and arrived at the police station precisely at 9 a.m. She wore her city analyst badge on a lanyard, a stack of official-looking documents tucked in her leather portfolio. Upon entering, she was greeted by a young officer at the front desk. "Good morning," Anita said with professional warmth. "I'm here for a meeting with Lieutenant Hoffman about traffic policy." The officer checked a clipboard. "Yes, Miss Patterson, we have you on the schedule. Down the hall, first door on the right." As she walked through the station's corridors, she caught glimpses of various offices, a detective unit here, a break room there, walls lined with the typical array of motivational posters and departmental accolades. Officers bustled about, some in uniform, others in plain clothes. It could have been any police station in the country, were it not for the heavy weight of suspicion hanging in Anita's mind. When she reached Lieutenant Hoffman's office, she found a balding man in his 50s, glasses perched on the tip of his nose. He greeted her cordially, ushering her into a cramped space filled with filing cabinets and stacks of paperwork. They exchanged pleasantries about city policies, budget constraints, and the challenges of managing traffic infractions. Anita jotted down notes, nodding at all the right moments. Eventually, she gently steered the conversation toward the subject of officer performance. "I understand certain units handle high-traffic intersections or problem areas. Are there standard review processes for citations or ways to ensure consistency?" Hoffman shrugged. "We have routine audits, supervisors sign off on citations if something's flagged, that kind of thing. But we rely heavily on the officer's discretion. They're trained to spot violations." Anita maintained a neutral smile. "And what about complaints from the public? We've had inquiries about potential inconsistencies in how citations are issued. Hoffman bristled slightly. We address them on a case-by-case basis. We trust our officers to do their jobs. If there's a complaint, it's investigated internally. Sensing she might be treading too close to uncomfortable territory, Anita changed tack, asking about the success rates of traffic stops reducing accidents. Hoffman seemed pleased to discuss statistics, flipping through charts on his desk. She listened intently, occasionally glancing at a bulletin board on the wall behind him. Pictures of officers at award ceremonies, departmental announcements, a memo about an upcoming raid that simply read, Operation Clean Sweep, date, TBA, approved by Captain Morris. Her attention peaked. Operation Clean Sweep. Could this be the rumored drug bust? If so, the date was intentionally withheld, presumably to minimize leaks. That aligned with the hush-hush chatter about a big operation. Once Hoffman concluded his presentation, Anita thanked him profusely and made her exit. But instead of leaving immediately, she wandered down the corridor, feigning interest in the station's layout. It was a busy morning, and no one seemed to question her presence. She paused near a glass window that overlooked the briefing room. Inside, a cluster of officers gathered around a board. She recognized Kessler instantly, tall and imposing, gesturing with measured confidence as he spoke. Even through the glass, Anita sensed the intensity in the room. She inched closer, straining to catch a snippet of conversation. Kessler pointed to a map on the board. Certain neighborhoods were highlighted. She couldn't make out every word, but phrases like coordinated effort, covert approach, and large-scale takedown filtered through. It had to be related to the upcoming bust. If Kessler was intimately involved, that confirmed her suspicions. Just then, Kessler turned slightly, his eyes drifting to the window. Anita quickly angled her body away, pretending to study a nearby bulletin about community outreach programs. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw him step away from the group, moving toward the door that led out of the briefing room. Her pulse spiked. She calmly walked down the hall, turning a corner, but she sensed he was behind her. Her instincts proved right. Within seconds, she heard his voice call out, "Patterson." She stopped and turned, carefully arranging her features into a polite smile. "Sergeant Kessler, hello. I was just here for a meeting with Lieutenant Hoffman." He approached, the flicker of suspicion plain in his eyes. "Hoffman, huh? Since when do city analysts do station visits?" She lifted her portfolio. "We're reviewing traffic enforcement policies to address community concerns. I'm compiling data from various sources, including APD." Kessler eyed her warily. "No one told me you'd be here." Anita shrugged. "Must have been an oversight. I'm just about done anyway. Didn't want to bother you." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You think you're smart, don't you? Parading around here with your official pass, poking your nose in everything?" Calmly, Anita replied, "I'm only doing my job, Sergeant." He huffed. "You know, I ran a background check on you. Anita Patterson, mild record, just a few routine details, but nothing about where you actually came from. No real story. Makes me wonder what you're hiding." A tension coiled in her chest, but she forced a measured response. "That's quite an overreach for a single traffic ticket, Sergeant." He smirked. "Like I said, I know there's more to you. Keep snooping, and you'll regret it." Anita met his gaze evenly. "Is that a threat? Take it however you want. Some places in this city aren't so welcoming. Anything can happen." She slowly exhaled, struggling to keep her composure. "I'll keep that in mind, Sergeant. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have more data to collect." He didn't move, forcing her to step around him to pass. His presence was oppressive, like a storm cloud threatening to unleash chaos. As she walked away, she felt his eyes boring into her back. One wrong move could unravel everything. Back in the hallway, she spotted an unlocked office with a door slightly ajar. Computer operations. If she could slip in for just a minute, maybe she could glean more about Operation Clean Sweep. She weighed the risk. Kessler was right behind her, and the station was busy. But if she waited for an opportunity, it might never come. Suddenly, the overhead lights flickered. A wave of murmurs rippled through the corridor. Someone mentioned a power glitch. Several officers turned their attention to the flickering lights, momentarily distracted. Anita seized the chance, ducking into the computer operations room and quietly closing the door behind her. She found herself surrounded by monitors and filing cabinets. The hum of servers filled the air. With each second counting, she crossed to a central computer terminal, scanning for anything referencing Operation Clean Sweep. Bingo! There was an open file titled Ops_Cleansweep_draft. Anita quickly inserted a small USB drive from her portfolio, an FBI-issued device for secure copying. Her heart pounded as she clicked through folders. She found a list of participating officers, including Kessler's name, and reference to large sums of cash expected to be seized. She copied as much as she could in mere seconds, mindful of the risk. Just as the file transfer completed, footsteps sounded in the hallway. Holding her breath, Anita ejected the drive and slipped it back into her portfolio. She looked around for an exit or a hiding place. The office door rattled, then opened. A young IT staffer stepped in, startled to find her there. "Oh, can I help you?" he asked, blinking in confusion. She feigned calm. "I'm sorry. The door was open. I was looking for directions to the records department. I'm with city administration." The IT staffer nodded slowly. "Right. Records is 2 doors down. You just took a wrong turn." Anita smiled apologetically. "Thank you. It's my first time here, and I'm already lost." She brushed past him and re-entered the hallway, her pulse still racing. The overhead lights returned to normal, the glitch apparently fixed. She didn't see Kessler, but she knew it was only a matter of time before someone realized she'd accessed that computer. Clutching her portfolio, she walked briskly toward the station exit, her mind swirling with a mix of triumph and fear. She had something tangible now, enough to confirm Kessler's involvement and possibly blow the operation wide open. The next step would be analyzing the data, sharing it with Leonard, and preparing for a strategic takedown. But as Anita stepped out into the sunlight, she spotted Kessler standing across the street, arms folded. He caught sight of her and smirked, tipping an imaginary hat as if to say, "Game on." Yes, game on indeed, she thought grimly. The stakes were rising faster than she anticipated. If Kessler was half as dangerous as he appeared, she would need every shred of her training, and all the luck she could muster, to bring him down without getting burned herself. Under cover of a moonless night, Anita joined her FBI colleagues near an abandoned warehouse by the Chattahoochee River. Operation Clean Sweep was in motion. The corrupt officers, including Sergeant Kessler, planned to seize narcotics and cash for themselves under the guise of a legitimate raid. Anita's role was simple: confirm Kessler's involvement from within and give the signal for a federal takedown. Clad in dark clothing, she slipped inside the warehouse. Pale light flickered overhead, revealing wooden crates filled with contraband and the shadows of uniformed figures bustling about. From behind a towering crate, Anita spotted Kessler standing over a pile of confiscated money. His eyes glowed with greed as he directed 2 junior officers to stash large bundles into black duffel bags, evidence he never intended to log. Adrenaline thrummed through her veins. She tapped her concealed earpiece, whispering the words her backup team needed. At once, the warehouse doors burst open, and armed FBI agents poured in, shouting for everyone to freeze. Chaos erupted as the corrupt officers scrambled, some reaching for weapons, others bolting toward shadowy exits. Anita stepped into view just as Kessler turned, eyes wild with betrayal. He lunged, but 2 agents tackled him to the concrete floor, wrenching his arms behind his back. The metallic snap of handcuffs sealed his fate. "You," he spat, breath ragged. "You tricked me." She presented her FBI credentials, her voice steady despite her pounding heart. "I'm an undercover investigator, and this time your lies don't fly." Kessler's bravado cracked like glass. He hurled curses, but the agents dragged him to his feet. In minutes, every crooked officer was in custody, the stolen money secured. Flashing lights outside announced the arrival of more backup, capturing the climax of Kessler's downfall for all to see. When Leonard Kim appeared, he and Anita shared a look of triumph. The entire city would soon learn how Kessler had abused his badge. No longer was he the swaggering officer who wrote bogus tickets and bullied those he considered beneath him. Now he was an indicted suspect facing federal charges. Before dawn, Anita stood outside the warehouse gazing at the swirl of red and blue lights reflecting on the river's surface. She felt the night's tension melt away, replaced by quiet satisfaction. Kessler had tried to humiliate her in court, never realizing she was the one with the ultimate power to end his twisted reign. By sunrise, news broke of the massive sting. The infamous Sergeant Kessler and his co-conspirators had been caught red-handed. Headlines would detail his web of corruption and the bold infiltration that unmasked him. And for Anita, who'd once sat silently in a courthouse corridor enduring his contempt, there was poetic justice in knowing that no one is untouchable when justice stands ready to strike back. In the following weeks, the Atlanta Police Department underwent a sweeping internal review. Investigators uncovered layers of misconduct tied to Kessler's leadership, implicating well-placed accomplices who had long evaded detection. Community members voiced relief, applauding the FBI's decisive intervention. For Anita, each report of another exposé felt like a victory, proof that the system could cleanse itself when dedicated agents refused to back down. Her quiet dedication had shattered a network of corruption that preyed on vulnerable citizens, especially individuals who, like her, had once been targeted for nothing more than existing in the wrong place at the wrong time. Ultimately, justice prevailed, and their wrongdoing was eradicated forever. In this story of tense courtroom drama and high-stakes betrayal, every triumph and tragedy led to the moment justice was served. The journey revealed how corruption can flourish under the guise of authority, and how even the most imposing figures can be undone by their own arrogance. If this tale struck a chord, please take a moment to share it with friends who appreciate real-life twists and karmic resolutions. Feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments, and remember to subscribe if you want more stories where perseverance collides with corruption and courage claims the final victory. Each like, share, and subscription supports the power of storytelling and the hope that truth will always stand firm, even against the toughest adversaries. Consider the moments you've witnessed where a single act of determination uncovered hidden deceit. Let this account serve as a reminder that relentless pursuit of truth matters. Stay vigilant,